well, no. Marvel's Eternals released last week, and it is a bit controversial, I would say, in
Yeah,
terms of its
of
reception.
how audiences have received it,
Yeah,
and especially with the review bombing beforehand. Like, remember, it was like 59% for it released in theaters.
yeah.
I actually haven't taken a look at the scores now, which I would love to see if they've changed at all, especially because audience scores were like at E6 when it first released in comparison to the critical score.
I believe the scores have increased since it first released back on Thursday. Like it has a 48% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb.
Okay. Which I'm more inclined to say that the 6.9 is more accurate as to what it is. But let's
Yeah,
go ahead and dive into the general conversation about how we feel about Eternals.
yeah.
Because we watched it right on the weekend it released, and we were definitely pretty excited, but I will have to say, my opinion on it has been waning ever since we saw it.
Really no. What parts exactly?
Well, the biggest part for me was the plot structure in the first third. That's what really did.
You mean the constant jumping from present day to flashback?
Yeah, because some flashbacks lasted like almost 10 minutes, and I was waiting for to get back to the current plot, and those flashbacks were just way too long. And also, they expected us like understand each of the characteristics of each characters right in the flashbacks, and then they're just going to reintroduce them later on. And I'm like, why not just have like a dedicated 10-minute scene at the beginning of the movie and then keep going from there?
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I personally liked the flashbacks and liked when we did flashback because I felt it allowed the characters to breathe more because the main plot is kind of on a timetable. So flashbacks give it enough room to breathe for the characters to interact and develop without it being too intrusive on the plot with like a contrived plot line.
Yeah, but these ones were too intrusive. Like I said, these ones were very long.
That's fair. I didn't find them too intrusive because I felt that they were necessary, and I felt that if we showed the flashbacks all at once and then did the main story, I feel like narratively speaking, it wouldn't mesh well.
Well, here's another thing, because of a conclusion that I found in the movie that I discovered before the characters discover it. Spoilers, obviously, we're going to be diving into spoilers for this entire review.
Yes.
But remember when they first interacted with the first deviant and it started healing itself?
Yeah.
And it was a power that was revealed in the first section, like in the first flashback. Not even a flashback, that's just how the movie started. It revealed Ajax's power, which was healing.
Yeah.
Like, they fought a deviant, and that had healing powers in its own. It's like,
Yeah. It's
oh,
Crow.
it's Ajax power that she's obviously killed. And then we go back to a flashback, and so I'm sitting here for 15 minutes waiting for the characters to discover something that I already know.
Yeah.
So,
That's fair, but I also feel you personally are a more eagle-eyed viewer because I know a lot of people didn't pick up on that fact until the reveal.
yeah, that probably just stacked on top of my desire to get the plot moving because I knew what was going on. The moment I saw that deviant healing itself, and the fact that we just strayed from the main plot for a long time before we got back to it really rubbed me the wrong.
Yeah, but yeah, I can definitely see that. But I would also have to say that's also because you were able to pick up on a plot point, so you were kind of just waiting for the movie to get to where you were. And I feel that may not be something for the general audiences. I know a lot of people didn't notice a lot of narrative beats that happened in this movie, despite it being pretty clear cut.
Yeah, but I do want to talk about the characters because an issue that a lot of people are having with this movie is the amount of characters it juggles. Which, I mean, juggling characters is not new to Marvel as a franchise because, I mean, look at Endgame and Infinity War. They like juggled like 40 plus characters in those movies alone.
Yeah.
I mean, mind you, Chloe Zhao isn't used to that compared to the Russo brothers.
And also, there was a lot of development across like so many different films for all of those 40 characters, pretty much.
And these are new characters, so I'm not going to blame the director for like not being able to handle it when this is a brand new um, group with characters that have been undiscovered. But a lot of people have been saying that the movie couldn't handle 10 Eternals. How do you feel about that?
So, initially, this movie is supposed to have 12 Eternals. It was supposed to be Icarus, Circe, Ajax, Phastos, Makari, Druid, Gilgamesh, Thena, Kingo, and Sprite, and then two more, which is I believe it's Zurak and Valen. No, Vulcan and Zurus. So 12 would have been way too much in my opinion. I feel like 10 was the limit that this narrative could really handle before it would have completely collapsed in on itself. As I felt juggling the 10 it did it well because there are a whole bunch of movies that fall apart with less characters. So I feel for having a cohesive narrative and story structure and making it entertaining, I feel the 10 characters was balancing a fine line that I think it did really well. I liked all the Eternals. My favorite Eternal was actually Druid. I actually came to like him. I kind of thought he would be like a pseudo-antagonist when we learned what his powers were, was that he was mind-controlled and he left with a whole group of people. I thought he was going to be a pseudo-antagonist, but no, they actually didn't. He was not a pseudo-antagonist. He was not a twist villain. They actually played him straight as he is a hero. He's just disillusioned with the Celestials' vision. And I really like that.
I do want to comment on that because with Druid and Phastos, their like motivations to become like demoralized about how humanity can progress. Because with Druid, he sees constant war happening in front of him.
He sees it's actually one of the first European colonizations on the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, I believe it was
Hernan Cortez. It was Hernan Cortez.
Yeah, and then the other instance was in the 1940s where Phastos is remorseful for his advancements leading up to the dropping of the first nuclear bomb on Hiroshima.
Yeah,
which I do like the fact that that was like a small detail. Like they didn't have to add that movie, but it was still like very nice to see that. Though I feel like it wasn't translated properly when they caught up to the character in modern day.
What do you mean?
Like, I feel like he would be more of a hermit than he was, but at the same time, he was able to develop a family. So he had isolated himself from Eternals and from like that role of advancing technology.
Yeah.
So I guess it was a little more subtle than like maybe how Ajax treated her like living situation where she was out in the middle of was it in one of the Dakotas?
Yeah, I believe it was South Dakota.
Yeah.
So for me with Phastos, I felt that his whole story arc and what he represented was how humanity like bore great disappointment for him when it came to how they would apply his inventions. But he realized that while humanity as a whole isn't like how humanity as a whole is flawed and dangerous and destructive, that doesn't mean that individuals are that.
Right.
I think that's what he was to represent. So I think it makes sense. I do wish we got a little flashback showing what he saw in Ben that caused him to kind of change.
Yeah.
I really wish we got to see just a little bit because from the little we see of Ben, he seems to be a good dad, a moral, upstanding person. Like overall a good guy. But I kind of wanted to see what Phastos saw in him. And what made Ben change him. But I understand that the movie is already so long and there are already so many flashbacks
Yeah.
But I kind of do wish I saw that because I feel like it would have just made Fastos' narrative a bit more concrete, a little less up in the air
Yeah.
as to where his stance is on humanity.
Yeah. And it was also good to see like Marvel represent an LGBTQ couple.
Yes, an actual LGBT couple and not, what is it, Joe Russo just in a, what is it, an endgame, like basically post-lit therapy session with Cap.
Yeah. Yeah,
I,
definitely.
yeah.
I mean, that was still progress. Don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
it was still progress, but this is in your face. This is a gay man. Deal with it. Because he's actually a superhero, one of the smartest people on Earth, and it
I
does not
wouldn't.
define who he
I
is.
wouldn't even say in your face because it was just. It
What?
was just in the picture. It's not like they. I wouldn't want to even say that they pushed it on you like that tired excuse of they dedicated all this time to creating a gay character in sacrifice of writing or the story because that's not what happened.
No, when I mean in your face, I mean they were not afraid to show two men loving each other.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by in your face, because I feel that, especially with big budget pop culture movies, they kind of do stray away sometimes of showing two men loving each other, especially in action movies.
Right.
So that's what I meant by in your face, in that they show it, they show that the two love each other and that they are affectionate, and that affection does translate into things like holding each other and kissing, which I feel was really big.
That is an important step. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, it definitely is, and I'm really glad that Disney did not remove the scene for a lot of its releases. But I did hear they did backtrack and they are removing it for the Indonesian release.
Yeah,
But
they unfortunately the Asian market is it's kind of important to their bottom line.
yeah,
Unfortunately,
specifically the CCP. But at least when it comes to the wider distribution, they didn't like tone it down in
yeah,
terms of Western audiences,
yeah.
which is at least still a big step.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it is unfortunate that they didn't that they're changing it for some of the Eastern market.
Yeah,
But
but it was like a 2 minute scene. Like it wasn't too obtrusive, but at the same time, it was there. It showed like, hey, this is something that's normal in society now, and honestly, I'm happy that it's there.
I would treat it akin to the scene that Star Lord and Gamora have when they're at nowhere, where the two of them are just sitting out by the balcony talking and clearly getting close and becoming more affectionate.
Exactly.
I compare it to that in the sense that it was like when it was there, it was prominent, but it did not define the movie, which
Yeah.
I find is great because it doesn't define Fastos.
Yeah, because
Fastos is not the gay guy. Fastos is the man who gave humanity too much power and now regrets it.
yeah, because that's not a part of his personality in the slightest. It's just something that's a part of his life, as in normal society, where people are not divine or defined by their sexuality. They're defined by who they are as a person.
Yeah,
Which I'm happy that they handled that character really well.
yeah, they handle Fastos really well, especially in the fight scene where he completely just demolished Icarus pretty much.
Oh yeah, he's definitely the smartest fighter for sure.
Like, he really just kind of demolished him. Like Icarus is clearly like supposed to be the strongest one in terms of like physicality, but dear God, he got his ass beat throughout this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Crow beat the shit out of him. The deviants in the Amazon beat the shit out of him. Makari fucking speed blitzed him to hell and back. Thena fucking matched him. Fastos fucking just held him down. And Crow just decks him from the top rope at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That man just could not catch a break.
Yeah. Though I do want to talk about the final fight scene because leading up to it, I mean, the appearance behind that deviant, did he get like a name at all?
Crow.
See, I think that passed over a lot of people in the
Oh, it
audience.
did. It definitely did.
Honestly, I feel like he's in contention for one of the worst Marvel villains.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honest. Like, he had the only motivation he had was Eternals bad, kill all Eternals. That was pretty much his motivation, and then he was killed by Thena in under a minute.
Yeah. I mean, when I look back at what Crow would mean to a narrative like this, I guess what Crow is that he is like the. So, you know how the Eternals are trying to stop the Celestials because it would kill them and it would kill the Earthlings?
Right.
Crow is basically the inverse of them. He's trying to kill the Eternals because that means if he doesn't kill them, they will find him and kill him. So he's trying to kill them to prevent his own death and his species' death.
Right.
And so I think it's better to see Crow not as, you know, as a character, but more of an idea that the deviants, like humans, can evolve, and they should not have been subjected to just being slaughtered because they were capable of evolving and becoming developed like the humans they protect.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're supposed to represent.
But,
so Crow as a character is a non-character. But what Crow as an idea represents in the narrative, I think fits.
Honestly, based on just how this story is structured and not using any like external ideas from the comics or anything like that, I feel like honestly all of the characters that were killed by Crow could have easily been killed by Icarus.
But I don't think it narratively works for Icarus to kill Gilgamesh.
I mean, narratively, yeah, but I'm just
Or in character.
Yeah.
I feel like you'd have to tell an entire different story if you have Icarus be the one to kill them, because Icarus doesn't kill his family because he loves them. He couldn't bring himself to even kill Druid, even though he says he hates him.
Or even Ajax. Like, that wasn't even a direct kill.
Yeah, so to change it to have Icarus be the one to kill them, I feel like would rob him of what his character is.
Or maybe not have Icarus kill them, but just have not a big bad deviant kill them, just a random deviant kill them.
Well, I mean, for a while, Crow was just
because Crow really just doesn't serve a narrative purpose other than an interruption for the main fight. Like, yeah, he can represent a few things in relation to the Celestials and the Eternals, but really, that's all he does.
Yeah,
and
I feel like
I feel like the movie would have been better off without.
I don't think so. I think he works if we stop focusing on him as if he's supposed to be a big antagonist. And not, instead of viewing him as an antagonist, I saw him as a consequence of the world that they live in. Not as an antagonist that needs to be stopped with an overarching goal like someone like Hela or Thanos or something. I see Crow as more of, this is something that exists in this world as a result of the actions of the characters living in this world. Because I feel the main antagonist and the main conflict is between Icarus, Sprite, and Arishem versus the rest of the Eternals. And I feel Crow is just kind of like, say, you know how in some like medieval movies you'll have the main characters, they'll fight like a monster that just like exists, but the monster isn't necessarily like the big bad.
Yeah.
Crow is that. So he's just the monster that exists in this world because of how the world is. I never viewed him as the big antagonist because I felt that the narrative never tried to push him as that. We never see him, like, unlike other big movies, like especially Marvel movies, where you get time with the villain, the main villain, you see them develop. We don't get that with Crow, which to me signaled that we shouldn't view him as that. Because in the end, he's not the real issue. The real issue is Icarus and Arishem.
Yeah.
So that was at least what I came out of the movie with when I analyzed Crow, is I didn't view him as an antagonist on the level of like a main antagonist, but more of like a mini boss that exists in this world as a consequence of the characters living in this world and doing what they do.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't buy him being like a force of nature as a result of their actions. Really, I
I mean, but he kind of is though, because like the movie even states the only reason he even is attacking them is because they drove the deviants to extinction.
I mean, yeah, he serves that purpose, but I'm trying to even figure out if the movie did a good job with it, really, and if they didn't do a good job with it, why keep him in
Well, for one, they need conflict outside of the main characters. Like this is a superhero movie at the end of the day. They
the movie?
need characters to fight, and the deviants are the Eternals' like enemy. So it makes sense to have them in there.
I mean, yeah,
But
I'm
it
not
also
saying.
wouldn't make sense for them to randomly appear if not being controlled. You know what I mean?
I mean, I still want the deviants in the movie, like having all the first half, like the first half of the movie,
Yeah.
where all the deviants are coming in, and then they realize why the deviants exist. That's all fine. That was all a
Yeah.
good part of the plot. I'm just having very big issues with Crow's inclusion because I feel like he didn't add much to the story. I'm just gonna be honest there.
That's fair. For me, he added he added a lot to me personally because it showed one that Arashim is not, you know, omnipresent or omnipotent or omniscient in the sense that he makes mistakes. He made a mistake in creating the deviants to kill apex predators and not really giving them, he not giving them like the same cognitive abilities that he gave the Eternals, but he was also wrong in assuming that they couldn't evolve to become like fully sapient and sentient beings
See,
like his Eternals.
see, I feel like, I mean, this kind of goes against what happens in the post-credit scene, but I feel like he could have absorbed some powers, gone off into hiding. The Eternals go and continue the rest of the plot, and then they have to deal with it as like a sequel. I feel like if they dedicated a whole movie to him having to deal of them having to deal with the consequences of Irisham, and just having a whole movie dedicated to that, I feel like that would have gone a lot better.
Yeah, it could
And
have, but
it,
clearly we know that the overarching Marvel narrative that they have going, clearly was not going to allow for that to happen because they clearly want the Eternals to become a galactic group of heroes.
yeah, I I wish that he was developed better, not as a character, but as like a force to be reckoned with. Because overall, he didn't really put much of a dent into the Eternals as a whole getting to their main goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I don't think it was meant to put a dent to them getting to their goal, but more about getting them to more like causing like more like Crow's existence is about allowing the Eternals to get over themselves in the sense that Crow killing Gilgamesh causes Druid to be like, you know what, fine.
I mean,
And Crow with Thena allows Thena to truly like come to grips with the memory crush that's going on with her.
I mean, like I said before,
Yeah.
I feel like he could have absorbed Gilgamesh's powers, fucked off to wherever for the rest of the movie, and then come back for a sequel, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
And that plot still happens, but overall, in the final act of the movie, he is almost irrelevant because Thena goes and faces him one on one, and then just comes back to finish off. And I guess, yeah, it helps her overcome her mind disease, which
I
really,
feel like it wouldn't work against Icarus though.
what do you mean?
Her getting over her mind disease, I don't think would have worked with Icarus because they establish in the movie
Well,
that
that's
her.
another issue that I have because they really didn't address it in the third act either.
Well, they did. The movie establishes that the reason why she's like this now is because of the recent deviant attacks. Gilgamesh mentions that fact because they mentioned that the fact that Gilgamesh and Thena fought deviants before the rest of the Eternals showed up at their place.
Yeah.
So they established in the movie that her memory thing is being tied to deviance. And
Okay,
so that's why you need Crow to get over it, because it's tied to the deviants. Because remember, it triggered again when they got attacked by deviants in the Amazon. And the only other time it came up again was when she fought another deviant. Meaning that you can't really have it get over by Icarus when the problem has well been established to be because of the deviants.
yeah, I just feel like his inclusion just makes the plot really sloppy. Or not really sloppy, but his inclusion was very sloppy.
I feel, would it be better if he just never gained sentience for you?
Maybe not in this movie.
Like, do you feel that if the same thing happened, say Athena still kills him, but he isn't a sentient being, he's more of just like just a monster, would it have worked better for you?
Honestly, maybe.
I think, because I'm noticing that the moment he gains sentience for you is that is you elevated him to the level of another big antagonist. When I think that's what's going on for you. When for me, I didn't see that as him leveling up to antagonist, but more as Arishem is wrong.
Honestly, I think that's probably where the disconnect is. Because, say, we can just posit this as a hypothetical or as a what if. Let's make our
Yeah.
own what if right here.
Okay.
So let's say he doesn't gain sentience, and then he fights Athena, and she just barely manages to win, but doesn't kill him. And then later he gains sentience as his powers from Gilgamesh start to develop. And then a second movie happens. I feel like a whole movie dedicated to him growing as a character and challenging the Eternals as a threat, and as a consequence of everything that happened in the movie and from the past, would have worked perfect.
Yeah, but that predicates itself on another narrative being built. That predicates it on itself of him becoming a big bad on his own. I don't know. The problem I have is because I know how the end credit scene goes and I know what the true narrative is.
Again,
Yeah.
this whole thing, like I said before, this whole thing completely goes against everything that has happened in the post-credit scene, but that just compounds on the fact that I think his inclusion was extremely sloppy.
That's fair. I personally didn't find it to be so, but agree to disagree on that. Um, for me, the ending. So, well, before we go to the ending, I really want to break down some things that I feel like people really didn't understand. The biggest thing is people seem to expect Kingo to have his Han Solo moment where he comes back and heroically helps fight against Icarus and Sprite, and he doesn't show up. And people are like, why did he just randomly leave in the latter third of the movie? And I'm like, okay. Kingo's whole thing is that he agrees with Icarus. He thinks Icarus is right. Not just because Icarus is his friend and his biggest, like, idol, but also because he himself personally believes that, yeah, it sucks that the billions of people on Earth will die for the birth of a celestial, but that doesn't change the fact that we're preventing countless lives from being born.
I mean, their audiences are probably thinking of these characters as all human, which, I mean, fair, that they don't really distinguish them from human superheroes in the rest of the universe in the movie. So I think that's where the disconnect is between audiences and Kingo's character.
No, I wouldn't say that. I feel it's just that people have been primed to believe that when a character leaves, that they're just going to do a 180 and come back because they realize they're wrong. And I feel like people didn't understand that Kingo, he straight up says, I will not fight my family. I will not fight my family over my principles, which I feel is very common nowadays in terms of how people approach like political differences and just moral differences as well. Some people are just like, I won't fight you on this. And they just walk away from the issue. And I feel like I feel like that's Kingo's character. He cares for his family deeply, but he has his own beliefs and he's going to stay true to them but he's not going to fight people on them, which I think ties to a wider narrative that I feel people really didn't understand, which is that this is an abortion allegory.
Yeah, yeah.
This is an abortion allegory. Kingo is a pro-lifer that is not militant about being pro-life in the sense that he personally doesn't like abortion, but he's not going to go and on whether it's good or bad in terms of like actually physically attacking.
I didn't think about that at first, but now that I see, giant celestial being birthed from Earth itself, I kind of see it now.
Yeah, no, the entire celestial plotline is an abortion allegory. And I feel that no one really got that. I remember I told my friend that and it blew her mind. That it's an abortion allegory, but it's kind of clear. Like, Earth is the woman, the Celestial's the baby, but the Celestial being born will kill the mother. So the Eternals are like the people who are kind of like doctors, and they're kind of like doctors and like other types of like social workers determining on the morality of performing this abortion.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And I feel like because people didn't understand that, they didn't understand why Kingo didn't show back up.
Yeah.
Because it would have completely destroyed his principles.
I mean, maybe an inclusion of a few like keywords, like birthed. I mean, they probably did actually use birth to the celestial because let's just face it,
did actually.
They did use it. So I had to correct myself there because they did say, "Oh, the Earth is going to give birth to the celestial," but I feel like because audiences are dumb, including a few keywords probably could have made this, but they also have to tie that or cross that fine line where it's not like slamming your head with the allegory.
Yeah, but you gotta remember who directed this movie. It's Chloe Zhao. She is a remarkably intelligent filmmaker, which is why I appreciate that she didn't dumb it down.
Fair enough.
I feel like this is a movie you actually should rewatch to truly catch the true meanings of this movie.
Yeah. Which honestly, I am planning on doing a whole rewatch on Disney Plus of all the movies that have come out because I definitely want to rewatch Shang-Chi and I'll probably rewatch Black Widow too.
Yeah, I'll probably do that too. But I feel like the whole thing about Kingo really, really hinges on the fact that you understand what this is an allegory for. And once you understand that, you see how Kingo becomes so much more realistic as a person.
Yeah.
And what else? I also really liked how the movie tackled different forms of relationships. We have familiar relationships in the sense of all the Eternals being a big family. We have romantic relationships in Cersei and Dane, as well as Cersei and Icarus and Sprite and her unrequited romantic feelings for Icarus. We have Phastos and Ben. We have a platonic relationship in the sense of Gilgamesh and Thena. They love each other, but it's a platonic caregiver, like someone receiving care type relationship. Like how, how some people have like caregivers that help them because they are dealing with, say, like a neurodegenerative disease and they need someone to care for them. Like, I imagine that in the best possible forms of those relationships, there is real love between the two people, but it's not a romantic love and it's not a familial love, it's a platonic love. It still needs a lot of trust and understanding between the two parties, but it's love nonetheless.
Yeah, like in the moment of the movie where they all decide to split off, they all didn't really go their separate ways because the only ones that were really like isolated was probably Druid and to a lesser extent Kingo.
I would say not even Kingo. I would say
I'm really like pushing it by saying him, but
I would say,
like he was doing his own thing. Druid is off in nowhere. But the point that I'm trying to get at
yeah,
is like people like each of the Eternals still interacted with each other while they were out because
except for Makari.
yeah, except for Makari because it was like Sprite would come back later with Cersei to where the or no, it was revealed at the beginning of the movie
That
that
Sprite was with Ajax
yeah, and then she went over to go see Cersei.
because Ajax was like, "You should go check on her," like a mother saying, "Oh, you should go hang out with your sister. You haven't seen her in a while."
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
so, yeah,
and then there was an instance where like a relationship between Druig and Makari was revealed at one point.
yeah, and that we saw it in the sense that at first when I saw it, I thought they were like best friends, but upon rethinking about it, their relationship is that of best friends that do have romantic love for each other.
Yeah,
In the sense that every time we saw them together, they were always poking fun at each other in a flirtatious way, but also could be interpreted as like very close friends. But the ending shows that those feelings are more than just being close friends because when they see each other, they're like it's like they fell in love all over again.
yeah. Now let me ask you this because I still have yet to determine this for myself.
Yeah,
What do you think is the weakest character of the Eternals?
Sprite.
Yeah,
The answer is Sprite simply because a lot of her anger and a lot of her feelings are not overtly shown by either the narrative like showing it through like background and it's not said either. Like the closest we get is when we see Cersei and Icarus get married in India, everyone's happy but Sprite is like fuming when they cut to the family. But it's so quick you don't even notice it.
yeah,
And also in the beginning, she has problems with Kingo because Kingo abandoned her. But that doesn't come back around, really.
because if anything, Kingo was the one to discover that Sprite had feelings for Icarus.
Yeah. And to that, I'm like, they don't show anything to really indicate that. Outside of the one scene of her being fuming, they don't show that. They don't show how that works. Not works. They don't show any build up towards that, but they also don't show how, because she can't have Icarus, it's affecting her human relationships and how she views humanity. The closest we get is that she creates an illusion in the beginning at Dane's party, and a guy touches her, and the illusion starts to wear off. And that kind of tells us that she has to create illusions to present as an adult to have real relationships, but they don't delve into it really. And I feel that really hinders her character because when it comes to her betraying the group for Icarus out of his love for him, and then as we learn, because she hates humanity because she can't be like them, I feel like we should have gotten more to explore that.
Yeah.
We never get to see it.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is, like, yeah, this movie has a lot of characters to juggle, and the reason I asked what was the weakest character overall is because there wasn't really a bad character in this movie, with the exception, in my opinion, Pro.
Yeah. For me, there wasn't any bad characters, but I would say the most underdeveloped character is Sprite.
Yeah, probably. I wouldn't even say underdeveloped. I feel like just developed.
I would say underdeveloped because we don't we don't get a real clear through line of how her character
Yeah,
is going. Like we don't see her like
yeah,
we don't see her having any type of antagonism towards humanity that would indicate that she'd be fine if they all died. You know?
right. And then the movie tries to reconcile her character by giving her happy ending. I can see the underdevelopment really bring that payoff at the end.
Yeah. Like I feel like when it came to Sprite, they really didn't really show much. Like even when they ribbed her for like giving her like kitty stuff, they only really show like the mild annoyance, but that's kind of like, a normal reaction that people would have in a situation that you probably couldn't extrapolate towards a wider just hatred for humanity because she can't be an adult like the rest of humanity. You know, like when they were making jabs at her at Gilgamesh's house, you didn't really see that. I mean, she just ribs Gilgamesh right back by like making him into a baby. So it didn't really seem as that was a big issue for her, but more like, haha, you're small type thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to mention before we get to the post-credit scenes?
Yes. Now, this is a take that I have that I really solidified as I saw the discourse for this movie, which is people went into this movie wanting to hate it because Marvel has now become very mainstream and successful that it's now a bit counterculture to hate Marvel movies, and they singled this movie out because on the surface you would think it's a generic superhero movie that wouldn't cause as much controversy because Black Widow was, beloved character that everyone wanted to move for. And then Shang-Chi, because it was the first real big superhero movie with an Asian lead.
Yeah.
I felt like this was the movie. And Spider-Man is so beloved that no one was ever going to go after Spider-Man. So I felt Eternals was like the odd one out to go hard on hating. Because, like, you can't get it for hating on Venom. Because, like, it's not technically MCU at the time.
Yeah, and also people know that Venom's probably going to be lesser quality than that of the MCU to begin with.
Yeah, so I feel like Eternals was the one they picked out to really hate on, and I felt that led to people being purposefully obtuse about the movie. Saying that, oh, this character doesn't matter to the narrative, or the narrative is so sloppy, or characters don't make sense, or there's plot holes, which I felt were all just completely inaccurate because of the fact that this is probably one of the better constructed Marvel movies out there, ones that have tonal consistency, ones that actually have real characters developing over a narrative that isn't reliant on multiple movies to further a character arc, and also one that asks a bigger question of its audience. I felt this was the one movie you shouldn't treat as a stereotypical Marvel movie that you should just hate on because it's counterculture.
Yeah, because in all reality, like, all the characters were fine. Like, I only had problem with one character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me personally, like, I feel that if there was a movie that people should have been hating on for counterculture, which I don't even think any movie should be, like, hated on just because, it should have been Ant-Man and the Wasp. As that was the more stereotypical action movie with, it's good, it's funny, but it doesn't have a bigger, wider message it's trying to tell you. The characters aren't necessarily deep. They're not getting deep development in that movie.
I mean, honestly, that movie wasn't even that great, not gonna lie.
I mean, in my opinion, it's on the lower end of MCU movies.
But it's not, like, under 50% on Rotten Tomatoes bad.
Yeah, I feel like
it's not worse than Thor 2, let's be fair here.
Yeah, and I resent the idea that Eternals is somehow amongst them, when Eternals, in my opinion, and actually my opinion of Eternals has only grown higher as I've gone back and relooked at scenes and read more about the movie, that, in my opinion, it's a top 5 Marvel movie for me. Because of just how genius the storytelling is, the representation, the way they weave weave the different aspects of relationships and how it ties to character motivations and how that impacts the wider narrative, I felt was done masterfully that other movies really just don't capture, especially other Marvel movies. Like, not many Marvel movies really ask much of you in terms of thinking.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's more among the mid-tier Marvel movies. I'm definitely not going to put it in the lower tier of Marvel movies for sure, but it's still worth a watch.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know. For me personally, I like movies that really push you and, like, actually challenge you on things and not actually spoon feed you everything.
Which, mind you, in the MCU is rare because, for
Yeah.
example, like only one movie has like spectacular cinematography, and that's Infinity War.
Yeah, and only one movie, maybe two, really give you something to think about, being Civil War in the pro registration versus anti-registration. But even then, that requires you to have knowledge of the wider MCU to understand whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And I think the only other movie that kind of tries, or other property that tries to challenge you on something, is like Thor. I feel like the Thor series as a whole, kind of has a wider like commentary about imperialism and why it has literally brought nothing good to Earth and Asgard.
I mean, mind you, probably not the Thor storyline as a whole, but
The meta
but Thor 3 combines everything that was told in the first two movies and just expands upon that. I can see that.
Well, you got to remember about the Dark Elves in Thor 2 and why they're pissed. Odin.
That is fair.
And you got to remember the Frost Giants. Odin's colonization of the Frost Giants and stealing Loki away from Laufey directly results in a lot of terrible shit happening. That if Odin did not try and completely colonize the Frost Giants, and especially steal Laufey away, not Loki away from Laufey, that maybe things would have been different. I feel that's just a wider narrative of the Thor films in general, was that Odin's warlike, warmongering tendencies of old was terrible, and that when Thor was following in those footsteps, he was seeing once again that if Thor comes to rule and he's like him, the Nine Realms will surely shatter because Thor will just lead another colonialist campaign across the Nine Realms.
And I can certainly see Hela as an embodiment of that. But getting back to topic.
Getting back to topic. Eternals is one of the only films that is standalone, but is able to tell an entire wider meta-narrative that does not rely on the rest of the MCU.
Because I do want to mention, like, Shang-Chi, while being a spectacular movie, like, follows the Marvel formula to a T, and is probably one of the best examples of it.
Yeah.
But this movie does not follow that formula, because it is extremely unique in the way it tells its story. So there is that.
Yeah. And I mean, even from not just the way it tells a story, but it's almost like everything, like the characters. Their names are not like ordinary people. They're mythological.
Yeah, or they're the basis for, like, they're even used as the basis for certain mythological entities. Like, for example, Athena is obviously, like, could have, like, they even reference, you are Athena, goddess of war.
Yeah, Gilgamesh, I mean, Gilgamesh in reality is the grandfather of all hero stories. Like, you don't have anything regarding, like, heroic epics and tales without the Epic of Gilgamesh. You don't have, even with Cersei, the dagger that she gives the kid is a real-life dagger that is considered one of the oldest artifacts in human history. Of oldest artifacts from human civilization, I should say. Okay. As it's from Sumer, the first civilization in the Mesopotamia within the cradle of civilization.
So that's why they specifically had that first part of the movie set in Mesopotamia.
Yeah. I mean, that's the origin of human civilization.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and so
I do want to say one last thing before we get into the post-credit scenes.
Mm.
Thank God they distinctly said that the Celestial was turned into stone and not ice.
Oh yeah,
like at first,
if it was ice, everyone would have died.
Like, if it was ice, this planet would have been over. This, like, when Cersei was changing the Celestial into, like, a white mass, I'm like, please, for the love of God, don't let that be ice. I swear to God.
Oh God, if it was ice, everyone would have died.
Because, Oh my god, that would have compounded everything about climate change so much.
Yeah,
that,
but that actually
that that would have been the end of the planet right there.
that that brings up a little side tangent about some of their powers. I when Cersei like turned the bus to roses, I was like, did she fucking kill him? Did
You,
she kill the innocent bus driver? Or when Sprite she flicks off Kingo and turns invisible, there's no like visual showing Sprite leaving her seat. So when Icarus goes to sit next to Cersei, I'm like, is he sitting on her? And then they quickly show like the next scene and she's like moved away, but dear God. But also, it would be terrible of us not to bring up the best character, which is Karam.
oh yes,
He was
definitely.
amazing. And I actually really liked him because
Again, that Marvel's knocking it out of the park with these side characters. Honestly, I'm honestly going to say probably the best side character we've gotten this year was probably Aquafina's character.
oh yeah, for sure. She was amazing.
Like somehow they're doing a lot better with these side characters because, dear God, remember in the Thor movies? Oh, those side characters were there was something else.
Does anyone even remember the real names of the Warriors 3?
Nope, except for maybe Lady Sif.
That's not a Warriors 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
No
that's
one
the only side character I remember just because of her inclusion in Agents of
yeah.
Shield.
I mean,
But
yeah,
that's the only side character I know. Exactly your point.
yeah.
My inability to name the Warriors 3 compounds on the fact that nobody knows who they are.
Yeah. Oh, just for your information, the Warriors 3 is Volkstag, Fandral, and Hogan.
Show off. but yeah, the only side character I remember from the Thor movies would be Lady Sif, just because of her inclusions in Agents of Shield, and Darcy because of her role in WandaVision.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even Eric Selvig kind of got screwed over, despite being in both Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron.
Honestly, yeah. Like, oh yeah, he's from Avengers. Not, oh, he's from Thor.
Yeah. Like, no one remembers. This man was naked in Stonehenge and got filmed being crazy.
But I think it's about time for us to touch on the post-credits scenes.
Yes. So, let's talk about the one that's bigger in pop culture.
Okay.
So, post-credit scene, we have Athena, Makari, and Druid. They're in the Domo. They're going out to find the rest of the Eternals and explain to them what, basically tell them, hey, this is what your real purpose is. Do with that as you will. I felt like some people kind of interpreted that they were going to stop all celestial births, but I never got that vibe. It was more like they wanted to tell the rest of the Eternals what they really are and what their purpose is and just kind of let them make their own decision.
Yeah.
But yeah. But anyways, while they're there, fucking teleport portal thing happens and a troll just gets fucking like kicked through the portal. And that's of course Pip the Troll, played by Patton Oswalt, notably for his MC roles as the Koenig siblings. I love them.
Pulling out the real obscure characters there.
Yeah, actually, they are pretty obscure.
Hey, we managed to fit 2 Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. references in one video.
Damn. Pretty good. But, yeah, so Pip the Troll shows up and he is clearly drunk. And he starts rambling off the accomplishments of his best friend, Eros, aka Star Fox.
Starred by, and we pointed this out a few weeks ago, starred by Harry Styles.
Yep.
With red hair.
Yeah. And for me personally, I think he's a perfect casting fit, especially given what Star Fox's powers are, which is on top of being the strongest Eternal, because he is born of 2 Eternals, and his parents were wearing the cosmic bands when they did the deed, and birthed him and Thanos, which is why the 2 of them are immensely powerful on their own. his powers involve stimulating the pleasure centers for people, and that allows people to like him. And it's used from being able to do operations of espionage by just charming people into letting him go by in places to copious amounts of sex.
So let's be serious here.
So, I want to get this out of the way now, and I really hope Marvel doesn't go this way. In the comics, Star Fox has been accused of sexual assault, so much so that he was on a criminal trial for it, and She-Hulk was his lawyer. And as a result of that happening, he actually gets his power. He gets that specific superpower mentally erased from him so he can never activate it to avoid that entirely.
Jeez.
And I really hope that the MCU handles these abilities tactfully, as I really don't want another Wonder Woman 1988 situation.
1984.
1984 situation where someone is just basically charmed into a sexual relationship that they truly had no consent over, and it gets glossed over as a good thing.
You know, I have not watched the movie, but I have heard of what did happen in there, and boy, do I want to watch that movie even less now.
Yeah, I really hope Marvel is very tactful with how they use Eros's ability, specifically that one, because especially in a modern age where we're becoming more aware of the issues regarding consent and the violations of one's autonomy and violations of one's body, Eros is very primed for a very terrible writer to make very bad decisions with this character.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So, and I don't want them to adjust his powers to where it's a blatant rip-off of Druid, because that's the easy way to go for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So they definitely need to be intelligent about how they work his powers, if they're going to at all.
Or at the very least, they need to give us some type of visual indicator of when his powers are active on someone and for how long it's active on them.
Yeah.
So we don't end up with situations like he comes to Earth and he gets a whole bunch of people to sleep with him, and we see that some of them may have been under control beforehand, and we don't really get to understand whether they were afterwards.
Or, like, and I'm just spitballing here, maybe they have, they give him, like, Mantis's ability, but only for, like, general dopamine.
Yeah.
But in a wide scale. Like, maybe that's how they could rework it to
Yeah.
be, like, a little more, tactful in this current day and age.
And I know some people may dismiss this as, oh, why are you guys talking about this? This is such SJW shit. Like, it's still important from a media analysis standpoint, because a weak author would introduce powers like that and not really address the consequences of said powers existing and the ramifications of them. And I feel the mark of a good author is one that can really show it off and show its limitations, show how it's implemented, and use it tastefully.
Yeah.
And I feel that's the main thing, is it really needs to be a tasteful use, especially because this is Harry Styles. He's already like a huge pop star. He's already like loved by so many women and men across the world. He's a very attractive man. And so it makes sense why he is put in the position to star as Eros, because he fits him to a T. But you obviously can see the optics of a pop star that's already massively popular and having a lot of sway over people, then playing someone who in universe is him but times 1,000 with a superpower to induce pleasure on people.
Yeah. Again, I do think like a rework to where it's a wide scale replica of Mantis's powers, but only for dopamine, but not sexual pleasure, could work.
Yeah, I think that would work.
Like, Like you can show like, oh, they're like all smiley and happy, but not like aroused.
Yeah,
And like again, a visual indicator would be important.
yeah,
Like with Druid's powers.
exactly.
But I also do want to stress that they not replicate Druid's powers one for one.
Yeah. But back to the end credit scene. We find out that we find out that Eros knows that Cersei, Phastos, and Kingo got abducted by Arishem, presumably taken to the World Forge, where their memories will be scanned, like we saw at the end of the movie. Um, and the thing that I noticed is, one, he has the same orb that Cersei and Ajak have, so it makes me wonder, what Celestial does he commune with? Is it Arishem, or is it a different Celestial entirely?
Which I mean, there are multiple. I mean, it's revealed there are multiple Celestials.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen 5 in the series. We've seen Esson the Searcher, Arishem the Judge, Ego, and then the 2 others who I cannot remember.
And then there's the Dead Celestial hole that's used for Nowhere.
Oh yeah, then there's the Dead Celestial Nowhere, that's 6, and then Tiamat, the Dreamer, which is 7. So we know there are multiple Celestials.
Yeah.
And
then another thing, is Thanos a robot?
It's still live. Sorry, we just had a minor power surge. I believe we are still live, though.
Let me go ahead and check. It still says that we've got people tuned in, so...
Okay, so, anyways.
So, of course, in the movie itself, it's revealed that, of course, the Eternals were built as robotic husks to help aid in the birth of a Celestial.
I would say they're more like synthezoids, a la Vision, but far more advanced.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so, with Eros, aka Star Fox, being revealed as the brother of Thanos, is Thanos a robot?
So,
because this is definitely going to cause some uproar, because I'm pretty sure they're going to find some way to explain this away. But
so
this is definitely a question that's going to pop up in the near future, and we should definitely address it.
So I think what it's going to be is, in the comics, Thanos and Eros' brothers, and not brothers, parents, were able to conceive a child. And Eternals can conceive children, but it's very difficult. Like, supremely difficult. And so the fact that Thanos and Eros were born already was special, which already special because they were born with, like, powers.
And on top of that, Thanos was born with the deviant gene.
Yeah. And so I want to lean that potentially they aren't robots, because we know synthezoids somehow make kids, because Vision, a significantly less sophisticated synthezoid, made Billy and Tommy. So,
I mean, they weren't made in the traditional sense. They were just made entirely in their minds. But of course, they're completely biological and legitimate children.
Yeah. So, I think that Thanos and Eros are not robots. I don't think they're going to make them robots. I think, though, that...
Because, I mean... Which is weird with Eros having celestial powers.
So, you think... Not celestial, eternal powers.
Or eternal powers, yeah. But you think that they're still completely, fully biological?
I think...
With eternal powers.
So, yes. I think they are biological with eternal powers. But the science of it, in reality, will make 0 sense. But we're just going to have to chalk it up to comic book magic. I really think that's probably what we're going to have to do. Because if we really try to think about this in terms of how this would work with real genetics, no. Just no. And, yeah.
Do you want to move on to the other post-credit scene?
Yes. In my opinion, the more important post-credit scene, which is... So, at the end of the movie, Dane was talking with Cersei, and he tells her that he has a secret he needs to tell her that he's been holding back about his family. And he says it's complicated, and then right as he's about to say it, Arishem just abducts Cersei in the middle of London, and everyone's like, what the fuck was that? And so Dane is now back at he's now back at his family home, and he's staring at the ebony blade, which was referenced actually by Sprite when talking about the swords in Makari's collection, to which Thena picks up a sword, and Sprite says, is that the ebony blade or Excalibur? Now, obviously, it's Excalibur because Dane has the ebony blade.
Yeah.
Which, in the comics, the ebony blade, he who holds the ebony blade becomes the Black Knight.
Yeah.
And the Black Knight is a character that has existed since the Arthurian period within Marvel Comics, and has been passed down.
Because there have been multiple Black Knights who have upheld the mantle of the Black Knight.
And they even reference Dane's uncle and how he doesn't get along with him. That's because in the comics, Dane's uncle was the previous Black Knight, and he was a villain, and Dane resents him. Yet at the end of his criminal career, he bequeaths the sword to Dane. So I feel they were actually kind of subtly hinting at the fact that there was a previous Black Knight around in the MCU, and he was villainous. But this new Black Knight, which is Dane, is going to be new, and not. But obviously, the bigger point of importance is that right before he picks up the ebony blade, someone right behind him says, "Are you sure you want to do that, Mr. Whitman?" And then it cuts to black.
Which I think most people who are attuned to Black Knight as a character and just following the MCU as a whole can figure out who it was.
But also, if you didn't, Chloe Zhao outright admitted it in an interview. It's
Blade.
Yep, Mahershala Ali's Blade was the voice, and so that is technically our first appearance of Blade in the MCU.
Yeah, I do have a huge hope for the Black Knight, because, I mean, Marvel has been knocking it out of the park with these costumes. Like, they rework, because remember back when Wanda was first introduced, like, the main actress did not want to wear a costume akin to how it is in the comics.
Yeah.
And then only up until WandaVision did they fully, like, create a costume that doesn't look silly, that doesn't look super sexualized.
And they even used the original one in a really realistic and tasteful manner. Not as a real superhero suit, but as a Halloween costume.
Yeah, it's because she was a...
Sokovian fortune
teller, yeah. And because Marvel has been knocking out of the park, with the exception of a few at the beginning, like, for example, Cap's outfit in Avengers.
Yeah.
That's the only bad costume I can think of. So I'm really hoping that they don't make Black Knight's outfit silly, because it's very easy to screw up medieval armor.
Yeah.
And make it look either too little or too much.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit the current timeline of the MCU, so I hope they make it look good.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a fear based in paranoia without any legitimacy whatsoever. I think they're going to handle it just fine. It is a fear I have, though.
Yes. No, I definitely agree. I really do hope the costume works well. But the big thing that this implies is probably the creation of MI-13, which in the comics, MI-13 is the British's equivalent to WAND, which is a subsection of S.H.I.E.L.D. that deals with the magic and supernatural. So MI-13 uses UK-based heroes like Blade and Black Knight, and they deal with a lot of the supernatural that is going on. Or, if not MI-13, potentially the Midnight Suns. Because we already know we're getting Moon Knight coming up. We have already seen Johnny Blaze and Robbie Ray as ghostwriters in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's at this point nearly confirmed we're getting Werewolf by Night as well. And it seems to, and obviously we have Doctor Strange. So it really seems like we're building up to maybe Midnight Suns and Dane will be a part of this team alongside Blade.
Yeah.
Another thing that some people pointed out was how the Blade was reacting to him. And some people are wondering if the Ebony Blade is a type of Necrosword, specifically related to All Black the Necrosword used by Gore the God Butcher, which is, of course, tied to the symbiote god Null. And it's not that far-fetched, especially because Null has a history with the Celestials. He is the one that decapitates the Celestial that becomes Nowhere. And so it does kind of tie into the greater like Eternal story if the Ebony Blade is a Necrosword that's symbiotic. Now, that's not 100% sure. We may just get the regular story of the Ebony Blade where it induces violence upon the wielder.
Yeah, because
it's increased violence and aggression upon the wielder after prolonged usage.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure about this. I was about to ask, because doesn't the sword cause the users to go mad? I was a little hesitant to ask that at first.
Yeah, it's not necessarily mad, but they become far more violent and aggressive the longer they wield the blade.
Okay.
And so it could be that. But just because we're getting the Spider-Man stuff and Venom is crossed over, and we're hearing rumors that other characters from the Venomverse also crossed over, who knows? If, and especially because we are getting Gore the God Butcher. We've seen Necroswords in Thor Ragnarok. We're getting Gore in Thor Love and Thunder. And since symbiotes will exist in the MCU, a la Venom, we may end up getting Null, and Null got a history with the Celestials. And that ties into the wider multiverse things because you have Madame Web and all the other aspects of the multiverse that come with all that. So, yeah. But another thing is, do you think we'll see Blade and Black Knight in Morbius as a post-credit scene?
I can definitely see it.
Because in the comics, Morbius is the vampire that makes Blade a vampire. Huh. So do you think we'll potentially see more Blade and or Dane in Morbius?
We probably could, yeah. Which would be pretty interesting, not gonna lie. We definitely have a lot of potential for characters to cross over, but we do definitely need to make sure they don't do it too much, because we gotta remember that crossing over isn't the whole point of the MCU. Or it is, but
yeah,
we can't let it be the main focus.
Yeah, but then again, it wouldn't be tasteless, because at least all these characters have a history together. I would say it would make more sense for Blade and the Black Knight to show up in Morbius than it did for Captain Marvel and the Hulk to appear in Shang-Chi.
Yeah.
But, yeah, overall, there's actually one side tangent I want to have about Eternals before we wrap it up. And it's not necessarily about Eternals per se, but it involves the actor for Kingo, Kumail Nanjiani, which is, so, when he got cast for this role, people were excited, but some people were worried that Kumail would have to, bulk up for the role. And so he did. He got very in shape. He's like ripped.
Oh yeah, I've seen the pictures. He is completely buffed up.
Yeah, he's completely buffed up. But that did lead to a bit of discourse about, did he use performance enhancing drugs to bulk up for the role of Kingo? And some people were shaming him or attacking, saying that he used performance enhancing drugs and this, that, and the other thing. And I just want to say this right now because I feel it needs to be said. The answer is yes. And the response to it is, so what? He's an actor and he's an adult, and Why should we care what he puts in his body? Especially when this is industry standard. No, everyone was looking at Kumail Nanjiani, but what about Richard Madden? He also had to bulk up to play Icarus, or Chris Hemsworth, or fucking Chris Evans, or Michael B. Jordan, or Chadwick Boseman, or any action hero, pretty much, or villain.
Yeah, because, I mean, mind you, I've seen the workout pictures for Chris Hemsworth. It's weird that the discourse comes now.
Yeah, when, in all honesty,
when we've had multiple other MCU actors come out with their workout routines in the past.
Yeah, and here's the thing. They all use performance-enhancing drugs. Every last one of them for these roles. And here's why it's not that big of a deal. One, using these performance-enhancing drugs does not in any way invalidate any of the hard work they have to put in for these roles. Because using performance-enhancing drugs is not an insta-fix. You still have to work out and properly manage your diet and your sleep schedule a ton to get the real results from the performance-enhancing drugs. If you have a terrible workout routine, terrible eating habits, terrible sleeping habits, and you use performance-enhancing drugs, it's not going to give you the level of results that we see these actors have. These actors have a lot of discipline, and the performance-enhancing drugs is to help them get to that point faster for these roles. Because these guys have to maintain these roles for sometimes up to a year, depending on if they're reshoots or delays.
Yeah.
So there's that. And also, it's not that bad because unlike in sports where you can argue there is an unfair advantage against other athletes but that potentially aren't using PEDs, when it comes to the world of acting, there is no competition. So many actors and actresses do so much to prepare for their roles. Why is this suddenly the line? When we come to accept things for our female actresses and models, the things that they do that are terrible to be forced upon, and we're now up in arms about it when it's an actor of color potentially doing it.
Yeah.
I felt that was a bit of discourse surrounding the movie that was a little bit weird and unfair because all of the MCU actors do this because they're actors and they're playing a role.
Because, I mean, mind you, just this year, Chris Hemsworth came out with pictures for Guardians 3 and Thor 4.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously working out for those roles. Ever since, like, he probably had to tone it down a bit for Endgame.
Yeah.
But, like, it's weird that this discourse comes, like, 12 years into the MCU.
Yeah, like, all of these people use PEDs. And honestly, the only problem I have with them using PEDs is the fact that it's just potentially being forced upon them. That's my real issue with it. Is not the PEDs themselves, but the context in which they may be taking them, in the sense that they may be forced to do the PEDs.
Or probably written into their contracts. Maybe.
Yeah. I know Robert Pattinson refused to do a huge workout plan for the Batman because he didn't want to contribute to the toxic culture involving bulking up for action movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Good on him.
And he got a lot of flack for it from, the typical macho men that are like, you're a disgrace or you're a lazy, or you're a pansy because you don't want to do the hard work. Which, he didn't say he's not working out for the movie. He said he's not excessively working out for this movie.
Like, I'm pretty sure, like, they're expecting him to look like the Justice League Unlimited, like, barrel chest Batman that looks unreasonably stocked and built. Yeah. When, mind you...
I have a poster of all DC characters in my room, and if you look at Batman is yoked beyond human-like levels. Like, his muscles are as big as Superman's and Wonder Woman's muscles.
Which is honestly unrealistic.
Exactly. But just to tie it back in with Eternal...
Which I mean, is fair because in not all but many iterations of Batman, he's had ninja training.
but muscles on the level of Superman and Wonder Woman
Like,
and Shazam and Martian Manhunter, who are magic, demigod, and aliens, respectively.
which it's what I'm trying to say here is like it's better for his character and his fighting style to be slimmed down.
Okay, yeah, that I agree with. But just to tie it back to Eternals, I just felt that was a bit of discourse that was a little weird because not just because of the previous MCU actors, but because Richard Madden was right there and probably was under probably a similar workout plan to Kingo.
Yeah.
So, if not, maybe a potentially even more intense one because of the fact that Icarus did a lot more physicality throughout the movie compared to Kingo. But even then, Kingo was built.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then that says nothing about Don Lee, who is a literal brick shithouse of a man. Like he is massive. But yeah. Anyways, overall thoughts about Eternals?
I liked it. Probably ranking probably like 6.5 out of 10. Wouldn't call it a bad movie, but there are some issues I have with it.
For me personally, I would rank it an 8 out of 10. I have it in my top 5 Marvel movies, and I can't wait to see it come out on Disney Plus so I can rewatch it because I personally just really enjoyed how gripping and deep it was. It was refreshingly deep for a Marvel movie that kind of became a little bit complacent and not really telling a deeper story about things, especially coming off the heels of a great movie like Dune. After I watched that, I really came to really realize I love movies that are deeper. And I also watched American Psycho recently as well. So I've just been seeing a lot of movies that do more,
Yeah.
provide more, and Eternals really fixed that itch for me.
So